This is a Wii game that came out back in 2011 called Ikenie no Yoru, which translates directly to Night of Sacrifice, a pretty generic sounding name, and you'd be forgiven for thinking that it's a generic looking game too. From the creepy little ghost girls, to the possessed friends, to the folk rituals, this game is filled to the brim with Japanese horror tropes, but this is far from your standard horror game, or really your standard video game. There's one bold thing that it does that transforms it into something far more experimental. You play this game using the Wii Balance Board, of all things, where you walk on the spot to walk in the game, and you sort of aim your Wiimote at the TV, which acts as your torch, or your flashlight if you're American. So I can walk here, or I can walk faster, or kind of shuffle on the spot to run. And I can press A to turn my torch off, or press A to turn my torch back on, or you can press A to open door handles like this. And yeah, that's kind of all the mechanics there are in the game. There's a bit more to it. If I hold down B and I walk on the spot, I walk backwards, which feels very weird. And if I shake the remote, I do a 180. But otherwise, that's kind of the entire game. For a quick refresher, in case you have no idea what I'm talking about, the Wii Balance Board was an accessory for the Wii that kind of looks like a set of scales, where you stand on it and its pressure sensors can detect your weight and balance. Nintendo released this back in 2007 alongside the exercise game Wii Fit, which helped make it a massive success, and I'm wagering that most of you probably know what this thing is if you're watching a video on the internet about an obscure Japanese-only horror game, but I think it's worth remembering how the balance board was used in games that weren't Wii Fit. Most of them were exercise or dance related, and if not, they were smaller skateboarding or snowboarding or party games, or it was more of a gimmicky side control mode in an otherwise more conventional game. It was rare for a game outside of these more obvious groups to be designed around the balance board, and one of those rare exceptions is Night of Sacrifice. Now, when I first heard about this game, I was incredibly skeptical. It sounds like a total gimmick, but a gimmick that I just had to try out for myself, and I was shocked to find out that it's actually kind of good. I've been questioning if my bar is too low from playing the games that I do this last few weeks, but I genuinely think that this is designed with a level of cleverness and care that works and took me off guard. It's a smart game, and maybe the fact that it was made by an experienced developer is to thank for that. It was developed by Marvelous Entertainment, who are best known for Harvest Moon, which couldn't be further from this game, but there are certainly caveats with Night of Sacrifice that you need to be able to stomach to enjoy it, and I don't think that everyone will be able to. The game opens by daring you to name these 5 characters as your friends, and it just so happens that I have a group chat with 5 people in it, so lucky them. Myself and Big J are dating, as are JJLJ and Ryan, and Toast's dad owns the house that we're all visiting. These little bios that tell you this information are the first insight into the sheer efficiency of how this story is told. Every tidbit of text is very succinct, though from what I understand, the translation patch did have to shorten some stuff. And on that thought, I just want to quickly shout Brand Newman's English translation patch that I'm using here. The game was only ever released in Japanese, but thanks to this patch, it's now fully playable in English, and while the patch isn't completely trivial to install on your completely legal and real Wii console, Brand Newman included a great looking PDF with the patch that has clear instructions and a troubleshooting section to get you all up and running. It's fantastic, and I'll include a link to it in the description. After naming everyone, you're thrown into the intro level, a quick sequence where you're hanging out in the living room, having your friends explain the controls to you. At first, it's very unwieldy. Every individual step lurches you forward, so controlling the camera on top of thinking about walking definitely takes some getting used to. If this was real, you'd be stubbing your toe on every bit of furniture in this room. Wouldn't want to knock over that Wii there, would you? It's always cute when games do this. Ryan's sitting there playing a DS too. Also, it's a curious choice to give all the characters these coloured cartoony models. They have Wii Fit trainer energy, which feels very out of place in a moody horror game, especially when the enemies look like this, but I guess they wanted each character to be generic proxies for your friends. There's no voice acting, they emote well enough with mocapped animation, but it's just always a bit weird and it always takes you out of the moment when you see them. Thankfully, you don't see them too often. After the intro, you're thrown back into the main menu where there's now a set of missions called cases that you can choose from that put you in control of a set of unknown characters investigating what happened to my group chat. Play through some of the cases, and you'll unlock yet another menu of missions where you're now back to the group chat characters' stories, and it's all a bit confusing and underexplained. The non-linear storytelling doesn't really add much, and it can feel like you missed something because there's just so little context given, and because only some characters have playable stories. But if you stick it out and dive headfirst into these usually 5 to 15 minute long levels, you'll start to get used to the controls and realize that they're far more than just a gimmick. I'll show you what I mean. The first main mission after the intro has you following a blood trail through a creepy corridor, a classic horror setup. You hear the rain outside, creaky floorboards below, doors are slamming shut on their own, and you're catching glimpses of ghosts in the corner of your eyes. Again, it's tropey, but it's well executed thanks to some strong sound design and a more minimal, immersive presentation. There's something about the shakiness of the Wiimote aiming that adds another element to it too, even if that was unintentional on the developer's end. Like, it's as if your character is trembling while holding the torch. The Wii's lo-fi, low-res look unintentionally helps too. The first scare that made me jump a little bit snapped the camera onto a chainsaw dude who stumbled in and hit the floor, and rewatching this footage of it doesn't do it justice at all, because it's the eerie setup and the controls that make the scare work. It's immersive having each of your careful footsteps guide you through the level and individually creak the old floor, and when old mate jumps out at you, there's the shock of having the camera snatched out of your control for a second after you've been so carefully wrangling with it, followed by this intimate, sinking feeling of helplessness. Walking around is clunky. You can't just quickly dodge roll to the side in a pinch. Instead, you have to turn and actually move your legs to get out of the way of an enemy. And so when something jumps out at you, you feel like you're stuck in mud, and it becomes very clear that you have no means to actually fight back. There's a deer in the headlights feeling to it that only works because of these control limitations, and it had me thinking about like old Resident Evil style tank controls, or maybe something like a Dead Space for a more modern example. And I don't mean that weird Wii light gun Dead Space game where being less nimble can leave you feeling powerless or panicky when an enemy is approaching and you don't have an immediate intuitive way to react. Only having a torch means you spend a lot of time avoiding and sneaking past patrolling ghosts where, if they catch you, it's an immediate game over. These ghosts are mostly pretty dumb and slow, and yet it's still quite intense sneaking past them because each footstep steps you forward a certain amount. Like, sometimes there's a small gap that you'll need to squeeze through, and you'll find yourself doing your best not to mess up your real-life movements. Like, if you move your wrist too much, or if you overstep, you could die. And there's definitely a mind-body connection that happens when you're literally tiptoeing past enemies that heightens the whole experience. Clunky controls making horror games more stressful is a practice that goes back donkey's years. You know, like back in 1992 when Alone in the Dark came out, we had the clunky horror controls back then. So it's not simply the clunkiness alone that makes Night of Sacrifice so interesting. It's instead the physicality of it. It's having to actually emulate the physical movements, and so where this game really comes into its own is when it makes you run, and the inherent ways that having to run dictates how you play it. Because running puts you at risk of running headfirst into an enemy, and because it's a physical effort to run in real life, even if it's more like awkwardly shuffling, you're naturally more inclined to walk everywhere and only run when you absolutely need to. So you walk through these levels, taking in that slow burn, creepy atmosphere, peeking around corners and hoping that nothing will jump out at you. And when something does, then it's time to turn and run, because if you don't, that creepy ghost lady's gonna get ya. These chases are Night of Sacrifice at its best. You just gotta run for it. You can't look back because that'll slow you down, so the only real indication of how close your enemy is the screeching sounds they make, or the rumbling chainsaw engine, sort of leaving a lot up to your imagination. And because you're both running and kinda scared, your heart rate is going up, and that mind-body connection kicks in again where you're physically running away from danger and trying to think on your feet, see what I did there, and find a path to safety. Also, I pulled my hamstring at the gym recently, which really made these chases much more intense. I felt like the character that all the other characters would tragically ditch to get away. Truly immersive gameplay. Whenever you see a flame moving around really fast, you need to turn off your torch, which reveals the flame to be held by this old zombie-looking dude that you then need to creep past in the dark. So I was in this cave tunnel that I needed to get to the other side of, and old mate was in my way, so I turned off my torch and let him walk his path so I could sneak past. Up on these platforms next to me, on both sides, were these shadowy figures that I just didn't want anything to do with. I suspected that if I went near them, it'd be an instant game over, so once I got past the old flame guy, I just ran for it. I fanged it to the other side without looking back and crossed my fingers, hoping that none of those shadowy guys were chasing me. I saw a nook that I could hide in at the end, and so that's what I went for, and then this happened. Just when I thought I was safe. I tried to turn and run, but it was too late, and again it was like I was stuck in mud. Maybe this is a cheap scare and a cheap death, but it was real good at lulling me into that sense of safety and pulling out the rug. As soon as I thought I could rest from all that running, I'm dead. Try again. The prior level had me walking through a tunnel towards pitch black darkness, and it kept blinking to black and looping over and over. I was receiving creepy text messages, something that happens throughout the game, and the more I walked, the more the tension ramped up as a panel in the roof broke open and eventually the tunnel twisted and spiraled forwards like a surrealist painting. Not knowing if I was getting anywhere and not knowing if the tunnel would ever end because maybe I wasn't doing something right becomes far more anguishing when you have to actually physically walk rather than just hold a joystick forward. It's appropriately tiresome, and that's a feeling that this game only achieves because of these balance board controls. When you look back to see that you're being chased and have to start running through the seemingly endless tunnel, it only becomes more stressful. My favourite level in the entire game saw my mate Ryan turn into a giant ghost and hunt me down. The heavy thudding footsteps, the music ramping in. After the slow burn tiptoeing pace of the game up until this point, this level feels insane. While he's thudding towards you, you need to shine your light in his eyes to stun him, and then just run for it. And then you find that there's multiple of him, and the stakes get even higher until eventually you find yourself balancing on thin wooden beams, which actually means balancing on the Wii Balance Board in real life, while stunning a giant Ryan who's trying to kill you just to get away. It's incredibly intense, and the closest that this game gets to actually having combat. In every other level, you're completely powerless. Now I've got a confession to make. I'm a Wii first-person shooter enjoyer. Red Steel is one of my favourite Wii games, and I'm talking Red Steel 1 here, the lesser of the two. The thing about most Wii FPSs is the aiming in them basically works in the same way as it does in this, with the cursor that you move to the edges of the screen to turn. Having enjoyed my time with the Red Steel and the Conduit games, I'm very used to this aiming by now. It's normal to me, but it's not uncommon to hear about people trying out Wii FPS games and giving up after a couple of minutes because the aiming is just so goofy, and I have to imagine that some people would have the same problem with Night of Sacrifice. What I'm saying is I'm probably more predisposed to enjoying this, especially because I'm so into obscure video games. Unlike Wii FPS games, and mostly to Night of Sacrifice's credit I think, it isn't a complex game on a mechanical level. There's rarely any puzzles, and it's usually made very clear to you what you need to be doing. Like, it'll often lock you in the room that you're in so you don't waste time backtracking, and you'll quickly realize that following the creepy little ghost girl is always the way forward. Being incapable of doing much brings a feeling of powerlessness, but it also brings a level of simplicity and approachability that is necessary for a game with controls that are basically unlike anything else. If you were feeling a bit cruel and you gave your non-gamer parents or grandparents a Wiimote and said, "This is your torch," and then told them to stand on the balance board and walk in place to walk forwards, they'll instantly wrap their head around that conceptually, like more so than giving them a traditional video game controller. They might not wrap their head around the aiming, that'll definitely be their biggest hurdle, but otherwise, if they can, this follows the same intuitive, unsophisticated design something like Wii Sports had. Like, here's your tennis racket, or your baseball bat, or your bowling ball, don't throw it into the TV. Here's your torch, here's how you walk, off you go. If your disappointed parent or grandparent can put up with the aiming, which may be a big ask, the simplistic nature of the rest of the game means that they'll be absolutely fine to enjoy it for what it is. Maybe enjoy isn't the right word. And what it is a virtual haunted house amusement ride, complete with cheap scares and great but generic aesthetics and atmosphere building. The controls themselves are very much the star of the show, they're the reason that this works, and if it was any more involved or difficult than it is, I'd be concerned that the limitations of these controls would rear their ugly head, much like Giant Ryan did so I could shine my light in his face. It's a double-edged sword though, because the simplicity of it all does get a bit long in the tooth as the game wears on. It's not a long game by any means, maybe clocking in at about 4 hours if you don't do the bonus stuff, we'll get to that, but even still, the mystique around the enemies and how they're scripted begins to wear thin about halfway in. When you start to understand how each enemy type works, they become less scary, and while I adore the more high-concept levels, usually you're just walking from A to B through dark forests or hallways, avoiding the occasional patrolling ghost. It doesn't help that this game loves a cheap trial and error death too, like at times it's very effective, like when that cave wall broke in front of me, but when you happen to choose the wrong locker to hide in because I guess the game is coded that way, it can be an exercise in frustration. Thankfully, the checkpoints are pretty generous, and hey, it's a way to get in your 10,000 steps, I guess, and the game does track your steps. The story really should help carry the pace when the gameplay gets a bit tired, but it really didn't do anything for me. It feels more like window dressing or a container for these levels rather than anything more gripping. The creepy texts are fun, there's some evocative imagery, especially at the end, that really lands, but it's not like I was on the edge of my seat hanging out for what was going to happen next, or the edge of my Wii Balance Board, rather. The broader story reveals mysteries about a cursed valley and how it affects you and your friends who are all meant to be holidaying together in a haunted mansion, but this is more about the set-piece moments than the broader story, so the whole naming your friends thing really fizzles out. There's no branching paths or decisions or dialogue choices, so there's no fighting to save some friends while losing others like in something like Until Dawn. It always plays out in the same way, being a very linear game. At least I could send silly screenshots to my group chat. Once you beat the game, you can play through the entire thing again in a sort of hardcore mode where each level has modifiers like a time limit or no running or no stopping, and if you do, you unlock a very goofy, raunchy secret level. Nothing too wild, just some corny dialogue, but I found playing through the game once overstayed its welcome, so I just tried a few of these missions out before putting the game down. Thankfully, World of Longplays has uploaded the secret mission if you're interested, you dirty dogs. All in all, Ikenie no Yoru isn't without its flaws. You know, this is no hidden gem masterpiece game, and I wasn't left feeling the need to sing its praises from the rooftops, but I was very surprised by its best moments, and by how successful its experimental controls are. I mentioned it earlier, but with all the weird games that I play, I was questioning if my standards were simply too low, but I think this is genuinely quite good for what it is, and what really solidified that to me is playing it without the Wii Balance Board, which you can do, so you only use the Wiimote to both aim and walk, and it's a completely different experience. It's far worse. Mashing the B button to run is trivial compared to, actually having to run, and so without the balance board, you're kind of just thoughtlessly sprinting through levels, and all of the novelty is lost. With it though, it is indeed a real novelty, especially physically running away from ghosts, which is heart-pumping stuff, and as such, I think that the world outside of Japan missed out on a pretty unique experience here, because Ikenie no Yoru, Night of Sacrifice, despite its flaws, is a horror gaming experiment that's mostly a success. And there we wrap up the video. Thank you for watching. It's always a bit of fun, isn't it? Something unique here with this one. One that I've wanted to cover for a while. Getting on camera is a bit of fun. And yeah, if you enjoyed the video, please click like, subscribe, check out my Patreon, check out my second channel, subscribe to me there too. And yeah, thank you to all the patrons coming up on the screen. If you want to be a patron yourself, you can pay $1 a month, give it to me, and I'll use that dollar on food or something. And yeah, take care of yourselves. Goodbye.